Good morning. My name is Brendan Jacobs, and I'm the Stewardship Specialist with the Raisin Region Conservation Authority, as well as the Program Coordinator for the Alice Ontario East Program. Welcome to the second of our virtual BMP tours. Today we're going to be visiting an additional 3 farms to learn about their farming operations and the best management practices they have implemented to improve not only the health of their farms, but also the health of the landscape. I hope that you enjoy the tour.
It's been in the family for numerous generations now. We used to be a dairy operation with a bunch of different animals, the pigs and everything like that, but unfortunately our barn burnt back in 1984 when I was just a young kid. So at this point we're predominantly a cash crop or farm where we do a lot of corn and soybean. We're looking to incorporate other cover crops and stuff like that, oats, and potentially get back into winter wheat just to have a bigger thing. We've added hops that we have in the background with the poles and everything too, that we work with some local breweries on stuff. And right now we've been working with just buffer strips around the brush lines and the bushes just to be able to keep them and give the area around it just the extra kind of windbreaks and everything at the time, and then try to stay away from the river a little bit just to kind of keep any fertilizer, any runoff from making its way into there. So over this section is the one that we had worked with you, well, this is about 5 years ago now that we've done that, or a little bit longer. It was an area where it was wet. There's some of the harder ground, some compaction and stuff in it. So instead of trying to fix it with tile drainage and stuff, we've left that kind of a little bit of wet hole and we've put it into grasses. And you and I have discussed some other things to maybe add a few other stuff in to get some bushiness or shrubs or different flowers or stuff into the mix instead of just the grass and mix that we have, just to spice it up a little bit. Obviously with having some tile drainage in it, we don't want to go with anything too big that's going to clog or cause issues that way, but it gives us a few options to stay away from the river a little bit and just dress it up some. So
I know, it looks really good. And so prior to putting this in, I guess what was apart from it being a wet spot, because I know you've put in your buffers along the entire reach of the Rico River that flows through here, as well as you've put setbacks along your windbreaks. What was some of the rationale with doing that?
In this area here, part of it was just make my life easier. We do a nice little strip instead of going around, but it's also to try to go back when the river floods, or when there's a lot of water coming in the spring, it floods off over, so there is runoff and an erosion that goes on over there. So instead of constantly battling with that it's going to go into fields, it just made more sense to push the field away a little bit. And you got into parts where the crop wasn't doing much at times anyways. I need the perfect weather, nice and dry, never overflowing before I'd be getting it, so it didn't make sense to keep trying to battle on those fronts when I can just go something like this and put it that it's nice and clean and easy to go. So
excellent. And for your windbreaks, I know across the landscape windbreaks tend to be coming down more than they tend to go in. Why did you decide to keep your windbreaks?
Well, when you look into lots of the research and stuff coming out, they say that there is benefits to the windbreaks of breaking up the wind, and it helps with the erosion and everything at that. So for the most part we try to keep in. There's been the odd fence lines that we do just to make our life easier with the planting and everything, combining, just to kind of square fields off that we will take out, but for the most part we try to keep them in. Once we have our field kind of going, if it's 100 acres or this section's a little bit wider, but we haven't had those fence lines were taken out before my time, a long time ago anyways too, so it's kind of made sense just to keep it now that we have our fields that we can just go like that. So I like having the animals and the creatures, and I know we've seen Jagger running around through here, so when he's over here working at the hop yard with us, he enjoys getting in the fence lines and trying to chase the rabbits and whatever else that he can in there, and the chipmunks drive him crazy. So it's there, you get entertainment out of it a little bit.
Now you're quite meticulous here, and you guys mow your setbacks and buffers routinely, correct?
We've done it about twice a year. I try to do it before there is weeds that have been growing up into it. So the last time I did this was about a month ago, and it was just mainly because the ragweed and everything was getting up really high, and I wanted to try to knock it back before it got to seed or too much into seed anyways. So besides that, that's the main reason that we kind of go through, is just to contain any weeds that are in it. But that's a little bit of work in progress too. If we get it that most of those weeds are in it and I don't have to be cutting it, then I'm quite fine with leaving it grow.
And have you noticed any benefits to your fields or your crops by having put in any of these windbreaks or I guess setbacks and buffers and things?
Yeah, the benefits, since we always had the fence lines around and they were fairly thick to begin with, we didn't really change too much on that. The more was the buffers that we put in with you, is that I'm not going down the fence line now for 5 or 6 rows where I'm going through corn that's basically up to my waist and yielding very little onto it, so I'm not wasting the fuel going down. I'm not putting extra fertilizer or spraying chemicals over on there when at the end they didn't grow thick enough anyways to choke out the chemical or the weeds. So the weeds were eventually going to start growing up anyways because the corn was growing so low beside the fence lines. So they were in a constant battle. So this way, with having the buffer, now the corn that's growing close to the fence line is all nice, it's up, it's uniform going, so it's just makes economical sense for me to not bother wasting extra products on that stuff. So the buffers give that opportunity to kind of clean things up and make it a little nicer too. So it's been a few projects that we're working on, and I'd like to continually add a few more when the opportunity arises. So
excellent, sounds good. And are there any other types of, I guess, best management practices or operational changes that you'd be thinking about moving forward with in the future, or anything that you think your farm could benefit from?
Well, cover crops is one that definitely looking at. There's different ones we're discussing about just throwing oats in after some soybeans this year and trying to see if we can get some nitrogen credit for them the next year. For the corn crop that's going to go in. And I've looked at different organic aspects. With the hop yard, we end up burning and steaming to knock back the mildew and the weeds kind of earlier on when the hops are growing. So there's different aspects of those things that I'm looking at, potentially trying to limit our herbicide use for everything like that too, because in the long run, I imagine it's the best for everybody, but hopefully we can limit our use to only when we really need it and how much we need it at the proper timing too. So
the changes that you've made over the last few years, how is that fitting in with how you see your farm moving forward?
Like everything that you look at, there's certain pressure to be doing things a little bit more environmentally friendly. So I'm hoping that by doing what we're doing, that potentially that's going to be the norm, and we'll be ahead of the game at that, and my kids won't have to worry about doing it or having the extra expenses at a certain time of doing it, because we're able to partner with the ALICE program and get some of these jobs done that I think it's just going to, in the end, helpful for the environment and will help our farm kind of push ahead to keep up with the changing times.
Well, thank you very much for guiding us around today and giving us some of your time. Yeah, great to see the progress here.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity of being able to work and everything that the program allows us to experiment in and be able to, obviously it makes things easier when the cost isn't completely on the farmer's shoulders to be trying to do some of the stuff too at the same time, so it's a great opportunity for people.
Good morning, Brennan. How's it going?
Pretty good yourself.
Good.
Thank you for having us here today.
Not allowed to shake hands.
No, elbow pump.
Yeah, the elbow pump.
There we go. Yeah, no.
Good.
Thanks for having us. We're doing a bit of a video series for the Best Management Practices project that we're working on. You know, I guess what kind of farm you have and what kind of...
Yeah. Okay, well, we're strictly cash crop now, beans, corn, and wheat. We used to milk cows. We started tile draining, bought a tile drainage company in 2012. We dug a pond, or redug the pond, 3 years ago now? And planted, 1,500 trees. Made a wetlands out of it, and yeah, let's go see it.
Yeah, that's good.
All right,
Great.
cool. The little girls got my granddaughters, and my daughter got the horses there, but that's just for goofing around with.
Yeah, it's a nice little herd of horses you got.
Yeah, 7 of them.
That was a sort of a rehabilitation project from something
Yep.
Dad had originally done, right?
Exactly. The old folks that have long died off has said there was a pond here for as long as people could ever remember. And when we moved here in '71, it was all washed out. And but there was a dam with some cement, and there was 1965 stamped in the cement. And we dredged the front part, and it was dragged it right down into the springs, and it was spring fed, and it worked pretty good for a long time. We had up to 12 feet of water here back in 71, 72, 73, somewhere in that era when we were kids. That was pretty cool. It wasn't bad. But then it would wash out and wash out. We had a heck of a time trying to keep it going. And then probably mid-'80s, we discovered what they call rock chute, right?
Okay, yeah.
Which is common knowledge now, but a rock chute was a new idea at the time. So we put a rock chute in, and that worked pretty good for a heck of a long time. Right here was where the old dam and the old rock chute was years ago. It was just, well, you know, this area in here. Yeah. But like I said, we had 12 feet of water, and it went way back to the peanut line, and that was pretty nice. But it was hard to keep the weeds under control. It was always weedy and dirty, and then Dad got a brainwave. He wanted an island, so we dug it out years later again, put an island back there, and that was a real, was not an asset. Okay. It blocked off the flow in the air, and then the whole thing, you couldn't control the weeds. And wildlife didn't seem to, be interested in coming. So 3 years ago, the boys and I, we took the shovels and the rock trailers, and we dug this whole thing right from the bush right to the bottom.
Okay.
And we hauled, there was lots of crevices and ravines and dips and dives, and we hauled all the rough fill into those corners to smoothen it all off so the water and airflow would flow downward and virtually keep it clean. And then the cattails, I wanted to get them started, and they started very well. Cattails clean as you know and we know. So virtually, this is what the pond looked like all summer with the help of the cattails and the airflow. Okay. So it's not really too bad. I'm pretty happy, but we only have 5 feet of water now. Yeah. With the way the levels have changed over the years, tile outlets and that, we're down to 5 feet. But for wildlife, 5 feet is okay. Yeah. And we got the wood duck houses, finally got them up. Okay. Got them up first thing this spring. No, but they say it takes a couple of years to get wood ducks interested. Yeah. And I just hope they're in the right spot.
Yeah, no, they should work there for sure. We could actually supply you with some other ones. We have some now that we could put up in the bush as well.
That would be great. Yeah, we should. That'll be our next step, eh?
Okay. Sounds good.
Anyhow.
You haven't had any trouble this year with build up of algae or anything like that? The air is just sort of pushing it through, and
yes, it keeps floating down. And now that we don't have cattle, so there's no chance of any kind of aftermath of cattle running into the water at all. Yeah. That's going to help out too, I think. Yeah. So should keep it all cleaner. And
you mentioned your tile drains do come in, but
yeah,
the plants and everything that you've got growing in here are filtering all that out before it.
Yep.
All that nutrients out.
Yep, that's right. And we do nutrient tests on the tile outlets as they come in, okay, and to keep track of it. And it's the loss is minimal, thank goodness. If you do your fertilizer spreading at the right time of year and everything else, and and hopefully not before a great big huge rain.
Well, when would the optimum time for fertilizer application and things like that be to try and minimize what comes out of your title?
May, just before the corn beans go in, and then again a split application in June-ish when the corn is up approximately that high. I like to split it, that way the N is readily usable and less chance of leaching out.
Yeah.
And then again we'll put potash on when the corn is off. It doesn't leach out like the N does, is what I should say. Okay. Yeah, anyhow, you can't, with the fog, we can't see too well, but...
And then I remember you planted some pines.
All along here. See, they're still small.
Yep.
Well, they're protected in the weeds. Can't see much of them yet, but last year we cut around them. This year I didn't, I just let them be. Yeah. Here, we left this open and they start here again, just about by the canoe, go all the way to the road.
Excellent.
And they came nice. They flourished very well.
Excellent. Well, I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, me too. Well, it's a waste of time, everything else, if you don't.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And the planting that was done in the plantation that you had, that you underplanted afterwards,
yep.
Correct?
Yep.
Yeah. And how was that doing?
Very good. Yeah. Very good, yeah. I'm just about to thin it again.
Okay.
We got to thin it or all the trees will be too spindly.
Yeah.
So we've been thinning over the years, and now I got a wood chipper here. Don't like to burn anymore. So yeah, I'm just about to start chipping in there, take every second or third tree out.
Okay.
Whatever, take the weaker ones out. Yeah. And obviously the nicest ones stay, and I'm pretty happy with it.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
I don't hear any frogs this morning.
No.
Do you notice that?
Yeah.
Like our blue herrings take off as soon as they saw us, but I bet you they're laying beating on the poor frogs.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because they're always here, and the sandpipers and the killdeers are smaller, but the blue herrings, they can deplete a frog population pretty quick.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
But what do? You're not going to start shooting blue herrings. Just let them go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
That wouldn't be very environmentally friendly, would it?
Frowned upon, I think.
Exactly. But I can't believe the way the cattails came. Is that neat?
No, it's really cool.
It's. Yeah. I'm excited. I don't even know why I'm excited, but I'm excited because I know they clean the water. I think I'd like to get cattails started across the mouth of the creek. Okay. If we could, because then it would filter everything coming into the pond.
Yeah.
And we opened up more springs when we redug, because we redug everything. From the bush all the way down here, we dug everything out. We dug it right to the rock. So we've opened more springs. So that should be an asset. Yeah. And there's no cattle or horses or anything grazing or walking into it. So, it shouldn't erode in much. And we're a lot more conscious of our banks washing in than we were 30, 40 years ago. Now you think about it right away. So we seeded these down immediately. These banks used to come they were steep right back to probably, here. This is where they were years ago. But they were just steep. Yep. It was nothing. So we took all that ground from below and then put a decent slope on it so that you could, plant trees and have vegetation where it doesn't wash out. Yeah, exactly. And steep banks are just too susceptible for erosion. This way here, it's anything we could do to kind of cut the erosion back is what we're aiming for.
Yeah, that's a good plan.
So here's the rock chute. Hard to see, but we just kind of leave it alone. We made it really wide.
Okay.
It's right to the edge of where the cattails start. We just drifted it in really, really slowly. We put felt down, right down into the water. Yep. Laid felt down right all the way back to there. And completely over that edge. And then we started placing rock. You take a shovel and you just kind of drop it in. Okay. Small rock all the way down in that way, right across here. Put a little bit of a slope on it. And then we placed the big rock on top of the felt with the shovel. Okay. Just placed each stone to hold the felt in place. And it doesn't wash out at all. Springtime, it's pretty beautiful. It's dead now, but in springtime, the water's just about up to here, coming straight across, good 20, 25 feet wide. Nice. Which is pretty.
Nice band of cattails that filter anything coming out.
Exactly. Well. Kind of neat, eh?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so it's working out pretty much as we planned.
And you can hear the water running now too.
Yeah. Yep. You hear it through the rock. It doesn't look like there's a lot of movement, but there's just enough movement, and like I said, you hear it, and the cattails are filtering, and all this actually filters too, and all this vegetation keeps everything from washing away.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, a nice slow process like this allows all the plants to take up that nutrients and that block that sediment, whereas it was a giant rush, you'd be losing everything downstream. So.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Tony, for having us today. It's
no worries.
Great to learn about your farm and your wetland and the projects you've been working on, and I'm very excited to be able to move forward with you on any other projects you've got planned for the future.
Thank you. Well, it's always good to try to be involved and do something good for the environment and agriculture in general, and yeah, hey, we're always learning new stuff.
Hi Jackie, how are you? It's great to see you.
Hi Brendan, it's great to see you too.
I know you've over the years have implemented a number of different practices on your farm, as well as helped numerous landowners in their implementation of best management practices. So I'm wondering if you might be able to answer some questions for us today and sort of guide us a little bit on a tour of your projects.
Sure, Brendan. So my husband Stephen and I own and operate a 200-acre currently cash crop and beef cattle farm. Our land base is in Inkerman, Ontario. We were formerly dairy. This is a third-generation farm, and when we transitioned out of dairy, we wanted to take a look at some best management practices that we needed on farm, and particularly in regards to manure management.
So what led you to look into solutions for your manure management?
So our farm, we've always done an environmental farm plan, so we take a look at our practices on farm and look for areas that we can improve. Manure management is environmentally can be a potential problem in regards to runoff and impact water quality. So which is very important to us to ensure that we maintain good water quality. So on our farm, our cattle are kept on in a paddock area where they're fed and grazed, and there is a lot of manure generated on this concrete pad. And because of rains and the liquid portion of the manure, it was just running off into the field, and then those high nutrients were not being uptaked by the grasslands and stuff, and it was just pooling and creating a big sloppy mess. So we needed to focus on how to better manage the runoff on farm, and that's where we put our focus on this particular project. So I was able to reach out to some researchers that were doing that type of work to see if there was any interest in looking at a research project that would involve a constructed wetland on a beef farm. But there's many avenues to get resources, even through your local conservation authorities, through OMAFRA, through your local county federations. There is a delve of avenues to go through to find resources in that regard. And it just does take a little bit of research and to see what may work on your farm.
It's an excellent and very interesting project. Can you tell me about the relationship between the project and Chris Kingsley, the university, and the research that has gone into your wetland?
So this wetland project was a 3-year research project. So with best management practice, there's guidelines on what is best to facilitate or help things like manure runoff, and one of the best management practices is to ensure that you have a 150-meter flow path. So that allows for the grasses to take up nutrients a slow process for nutrient uptake of the grasses before it reaches a watercourse. But there was no sound science behind that. So we wanted to do a comparison So we did a comparison between the constructed wetland that's behind us here and the flow path to see the impacts of both and the uptake of both and how much nutrient removal both did. So this particular project on our farm was the constructed wetland that's here behind me, which consists of 3 cells. It's a small footprint, it's not a huge wetland, and it's gravity fed, and the strong effluent or runoff from the manure pile hits the first cell and where it sits for a time, and then gravity flows through to the second cell where you can see the aquatic plants are planted there. It's a shallower cell, so it crossed there, and the aquatic plants, bulrushes, cattails, will take up those nutrients, and then it goes to a third cell where it is finished off there, and then through gravity it will continue on a flow path, right? So the results of this study have proven that this type of system works very well, as in a 95% efficiency removal rate of phosphorus and nitrogen as well, and it's comparable to the 150 meter flow path. So what does that tell you? It allows farmers who may not have the space to do the 150 meter flow path, but have the smaller footprint to be able to do a constructed wetland and still receive, be able to remove the nutrients in a good, at a good rate, you know. So the impact on the land is minimal.
Wow, this project seems like it's got a lot of value to it, especially for the tight space that it's in. It's amazing to think that a wetland of this size could have such a large impact on the quality of water.
This particular project is a good project to do if you don't want to incur the capital expenses of create a larger manure storage or a covered storage. Those were the options we were looking at when we were looking at manure manage. Do we put the capital costs into you know, like a liquid type storage or you know, a covered storage? And then this particular project, the wetland, the cost was minimal, right? Our soil type is predominantly clay, so there was no issues about the clay lining or the leaching from here. The cost was just, you know, a matter of getting the backhoe in and working with the researchers on design. So it was very minimal.
You also mentioned that you have a buffer project and a pollinator hedgerow that you've implemented. Is that something you could take us a look at?
So yeah, I'd love to show you that. So on farm, we decided that we wanted to do some hedgerow, and the choice that we took was we're doing a pollinating hedgerow. So not only will it be a bit of a windbreak, but it also will provide berries for the birds in the area. And in particular, the pollinators that I chose are edible berries. So things like chokecherry, high bush cranberry, these are the ones that were planted along here. Now they're planted small, so it takes a little while to get established, and sometimes there's some challenges in replanting that's required because your summers might have drought, and it takes a little monitoring to get established. But once established, they will certainly bush up and start to reproduce themselves along this strip. This particular area was chosen because it's the laneway access to our acreage behind us, and this strip along the fence was not used in other ways, and rather it grow up in buckthorn and invasive type trees. We decided to establish this buffer strip. We're on the edge of our municipal drain that runs through our farm, and we're standing in an established buffer that we did probably about 2012, and it was one of the first projects done here in Eastern Ontario under the ALICE program. And what it consists of is along the edge for bank stabilization is some shrubs that are like red dogwood. Those keep the bank of the water when it's spring freshet allows the bank to be stabilized, and we don't lose any land that way. We do not cut this area at all. Our crops are about 3 meters away from the top of bank, and we maintain this in grasses. Behind me you should be able to see a row of planted trees. And they start off very small, so it takes a little while for them to get established, but once established they do quite well. These trees will grow and become well established, and they will offer a windbreak for the crops on this side as well as this side to prevent any soil erosion if there's exposed soil at a certain time of year.
So what was the thought process and some of the considerations that went into you selecting the species that were planted in both your hedgerow and your buffer? I know I was involved with some of the design aspects of that, and I remember when I submitted the first draft designs to you and you marked them all up, and basically I had to start from scratch a number of times before we came to some kind of species list that you were comfortable with. So what were some of the considerations you were taking into account when you were looking at the species list that I submitted to you and selecting the ones that you wanted to have planted on your farm?
When selecting the species to plant, I worked very closely with you, Brendan, on the type of trees to select for our operation, and things that we considered is root systems, the height they grow, how wide they get, their breakability, because we still have to farm this land, right? And we still want to be able to bring our equipment in. We don't want to have to deal with issues with tile drainage because of root systems. So there is a bit of a selection process that you need to sit down and work as you design the project.
So overall, it seems like the project has been a great addition to your farm, and that you're seeing a lot of success from it.
The one thing I can say about the 3 projects that we've implemented, that the Alice group is very helpful in getting it started, and monitoring and helping you infill if required. The one thing that I can say, it's easy to do. These were not big hardship projects. They're fairly easy to do, and they don't take away from the farm at all. If anything, they add to it, and in adding to it, it brings the species, the biodiversity, just the beauty of nature.
The project looks awesome. Thank you so much for spending time with us and for showing us around these projects.
Thank you, Brendan. My pleasure.
Thank you very much for joining us today. I hope that you enjoyed the tour. It is by working in partnership with local landowners that we were able to see marked improvements in the health of our watersheds and the sustainability of their farming operations.